Hello students, myself Rajkumar Meena, Assistant Professor in English, BSR Arts College, Alwar. Today with the help of this video, we will try to make you understand literary characteristics of 18th century period. In earlier video, I have discussed with you the political and social background of the 18th century period, and with the help of this video we will only try to make you describe the literary characteristic of the age of 18th century. The political and the social changes are always responsible for the literary changes in the any age. After the formation of the political parties, people enthusiasm towards pubs, coffee houses, clubs and dance parties and degradation of moral values both in society and individual put the literary person in a position of a mental unrest. They wanted reform, hence they started to collect logics to prove their anger, and especially against the aristocratic gentlemen and fashionable girls. They wanted to represent the fact not through the fanciful writing but through the reason and with logic. They wanted to represent their action not by the imitating them either better or worse than in their real life but by the use of parody. Burlesque and humor, satire was their object wit, humor, exaggeration, parody, burlesque, and hyperbole were their tools. Correctness was their force, reason was their defense. The classics were their model, towns and cities were their field, and mostly the prose was their medium. However, the literary characteristics of age are given below as per the first, the age of prose and reason. It was the Matthew Arnold who calls the 18th century in English literature the age of prose and reason. This century produced many great writers of prose like Jonathan Swift, Edition Steele, Essay of Swiftians, Trains and Vigor, Satire of Feelings, Artistic Novel, and Gibson's ways of writing. History has no parallel in English literature. Dryden and Pope came out with the most correct form of poetry, but their poetry was artificial and could not delight the people. Matthew Arnold observed that Dryden and Pope are the classics of not our poetry but prose. The work of this age was protest as well as the contrast against excessive emotions, sentimentalism, extravagance, and over imagination. Literature was the result of pounding by the knights and was not directly coming from the heart. In the word of W.H. Hudson, it is the literature of intelligence, of wit, and of fancy, not a literature of emotions, passions, of creating energy. We find a real, reconcilable description of the contemporary society in Pope, Swift, Edition, etc. Second major feature was the satire. The satire, the tendency of Augustan age, for example, realism in the subject matter and refinement in of expression had also came to the literature of 18th century. Satire, in fact, has its origin in realism when real is departed from ideal and the literary artist aim to make people realized the reality, he came out with satire according to Dryden. His aim is amendments of vice by corrections after the degradation of moral values in people, institutions, in people and institution, destructive criticism in the form of satire was came into the existence. The satirists want to reform both individual and society by cleaning and clearing away the rubbish from their minds. As William J. Long writes, a satirist is like a laborer who clears away ruins and rubbish of an old house before the architect and the builder begin on a new and beautiful structure. Dryden, Poe, Swift, and addition, the best satirists not only of this age but of all the ages. Hence, the third main feature of this age is the age of classical age. We can say that the period of 18th century is also be called as the age of the classical age. The age of Alexander Pope is also known as Neoclassical Age. The term classical is applied to the Greek and Roman writers Homer and Virgil, and of course to the work of those who followed them, the age of King Augustus in Rome, Dante in Italy, and Louis XVI in France, and Queen Anne in England is known as a new classical age. In the work of Pope, Swift and Johnson, we find resemblance of the work of Heron, Virgil, Syria, and all the brilliant writers, the Roman literature, famous in the day of Augustus. These writers did not copy them exactly, rather they methodized the classical rules. Those rules of old is dressed, not devised, are nature still, but the nature methodized. They used heroic couplets in poetry, elegance in prose, but in doing so, they lost the individuality and became artificial. They had to repress their emotion and use only precise method. Hence, the classicalism of these writers were termed as pseudo-classicalism or false or sham classicalism. Fourth main feature of this age is the literature produced in this age is also known as a town literature. So, the fourth feature of this age is town literature. With the development in trade and industry, the town also developed and the literary activity were confined to the towns only. It was actually the literature of toilet rooms, pubs, coffees, houses, dance parties, fashion shows, and aristocratic societies. Pope's coffee house and toilet rooms, Swift Library, and conflicts and Blake's London are the result of their urban outlooks and temperament. They were writing just what they had seen. They did not write with the closed eyes, though they were the keen observer, but did not want wander into the countryside. Hence, the poet of this age, as Alexander Pope, was born in year 1688 in London. His parents were Catholic. He received very little school education and he was physically weak, so he was not sent to the school, but he was educated privately at home. these were the these were the chief characteristics of 18th century which we found in the writers. These features reflect the tendency or reflect the chief characteristics of 18th century writer which was present in their writings. Hence, we can say that it was the golden period for the prose, and a new emerging middle class was the chief characteristics of this age, and it was the age of, we can say that it was the age of uh, imposing emotions in literature. People were Writers were observing their society very keenly, but they were trying to make their literature more refined and more delightful in manner to presenting it naturally in their writing.